Now on 2GB, Ben Fordham Live, Sydney's best breakfast.
Sydney, it's Thursday the 15th of July. How you holding up? Partly cloudy today. Right now, 15 degrees in the city, 14 in Parramatta, 10 in Penrith, 14 in North Sydney, Cronulla 13, Campbelltown 7, Bankstown 9, and it's 15 degrees on the Central Coast. So not as cold this morning as we've had in recent days. A top today of 21, but a partly cloudy day today for Sydney. Our number 131873. You can email ben@2gb.com. And the text line is up and running, 0460 873 873. Gary's already on the text saying, I'm getting up early, having breakfast. I'm excited. I'm getting my second AstraZeneca jab today. Good on you, Gary. Thank you very much for getting in touch nice and early. We're going to catch up with Barnaby Joyce today, the Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm going to ask him about the fact that China is currently on our doorstep. A Chinese surveillance ship that's floating off the Queensland coast. And they're here to monitor training exercises between Australia and America. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, says we are very wary of the spy ship. He says the vessel is in an area that it's allowed to be in. He says we know that they're there and we're keeping a close eye on it. The PM supports freedom of navigation in international waters and points out that we do similar things in the South China Sea. He says, of course, we watch them and they're watching us, so at least we're all on the same page. The Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, says it's no surprise the ship has arrived. He says we have planned for their presence. The Liberal MP, Dave Sharma, has pointed to the elephant in the room. He says it doesn't represent the act of a friendly nation. You can say that again, Dave. We'll catch up with Barnaby Joyce to talk about that and other matters at 7:15 this morning. Maybe they were here for the State of Origin because that was held last night on the Gold Coast and Queensland has restored a little bit of pride. The Shield comes home to New South Wales because we won the first two games, but Queensland was victorious last night, 20-18 on the Gold Coast. They took a 2-point lead into half-time. The game really opened up in the last 40, and in the end it came down to a missed opportunity from Latrell Mitchell. So Queensland had a 2-point lead. Latrell Mitchell had the chance to level the scores in the 78th minute with a penalty goal, but it was from 50 metres out and it fell short. So Queensland coming out on top. 20-18, but New South Wales wins the series. Well done to Freddie Fittler and the boys. Now, Fairfield, it's looking a little bit better this morning. People seem to be getting the message that they don't need to get tested until Saturday. And thanks to clarifications that came through this program, people know now that they can get their 3-day surveillance test outside of Fairfield. The Premier backed that up yesterday at her press conference. People who work outside of Fairfield should get tested near their work, not in Fairfield. This is to cut down on the queues and to try and prevent a repeat of what happened yesterday. On top of the existing 24/7 testing clinic at the Endeavour Sports Park car park, the clinic at the Fairfield Showground will now operate 24 hours a day. So 24/7 at Fairfield Showground, and that starts at 6 o'clock this morning. So let me know how it's looking this morning. We're told through Michael McLaren's program that things are looking a little bit better today. There's a brand new 24/7 drive-through clinic that will open at the Mounties car park on Humphreys Road from 10 a.m. There's also a new clinic at Smithfield Clinical Labs Pathology on Rossford Street in Smithfield. It opens at 8 a.m. And the hours have been extended at the Wetherill Park drive-through clinic on Mansfield Street. It will now operate every day from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. And these are all in addition to the existing testing clinics across the Fairfield LGA. Remember, if you live in the Fairfield local government area and you need to work outside that area, you still need to be tested every 3 days, but you're encouraged to do the test closer to your workplace. You don't need to isolate after getting those tests. unless you have symptoms. If you have symptoms, you should not be going to work. You shouldn't be going anywhere. Get a test and go home and isolate. Now, also, you don't need to get tested if you work in the Fairfield LGA but live outside the Fairfield LGA unless you have symptoms. You are not subjected to the surveillance testing if you live outside Fairfield and work inside Fairfield. They're the rules. Some people are confused by them, but hopefully we've provided a bit of clarity across yesterday morning and today. And let's hope this morning is going to be a little bit calmer in Fairfield. If you're listening right now, I'd love to hear from you. 131873, ben at 2gb.com, and the text line is up and running, 0460 873 873. 131873, the open line number. It's 5:45. The weather today for Sydney is looking, it's a bit of this, a bit of that, to be honest with you. I'm trying to look on the bright side of life. Look, it is warmish, 21 the top today, partly cloudy. Right now, 15 degrees on the coast. It's 10 in Penrith, 14 in Parramatta, 9 in Bankstown. Around Australia, Canberra, showers, 13. Brisbane, a possible shower, 25. Melbourne's got possible showers and 17. Perth, you've got a shower or two, a possible late storm and a top of 18. Adelaide, a shower or two, a maximum of 17. Hobart, a possible bit of light rain and a top of 14. And Darwin, you are clear today and a top of 32.
This is Ben Fordham Live with Sydney's best breakfast on 2GB 873.
And here's a thought to kick off your Thursday morning. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. I've got to admit, I've been feeling the load a little bit lately, but I've just decided I've got to shake it off. Isn't that what Taylor Swift says? You just got to shake it off. Shake it off. Get on with it. We don't know how long we're going to be going in this situation, but we can't do much about it at the moment. Gladys Berejiklian has extended the Sydney lockdown another 2 weeks, so that's until at least July 30. We need to stress there's no guarantees it'll end on July 30. That includes Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast, Wollongong and Shell Harbour. I'd love to hear from people in Wollongong. How do you guys feel being locked down when you haven't had a positive case there in ages? And when questions were asked at the press conference yesterday, I couldn't quite understand what the answer was. And there's a few of those questions that when they're asked of Gladys Berejiklian, she says, I'll give that one to Kerry Chant. And Dr. Kerry Chant comes forward and does her best to answer the question, and she answers it, but I don't really get the justification for it. I suppose they're worried about people moving from one place to the other, but I don't know. I think it's difficult when you're locking people down when there's not an issue, because then when there is an issue and you do need to lock them down, they think, well, hang on a moment. Couldn't we have waited until now, until we had to deal with a lockdown? The lockdown was due to end tomorrow, but we all knew that wasn't going to happen. The Premier says there are too many positive cases who've been infectious while they're in the community. And she says it's that number that will determine the future. We recorded 97 new local cases, with at least 24 in the community while infectious. And the Premier says it's that number, 24, that we need to get down as close to zero as possible. And she says it all now comes down to human behaviour. The future depends on us, according to the Premier. Liverpool Hospital has been forced to postpone all non-urgent surgery. A patient has tested positive at Liverpool Hospital, so dozens of staff are in isolation. Operating theatres are undergoing a deep clean. It's believed the patient who tested positive is pregnant and is there for a caesarean. Emergency surgery at the hospital is continuing. That's Liverpool Hospital in Sydney Southwest. And Victoria has now got issues too that came from New South Wales. Sorry, Victoria. Health authorities are now considering another lockdown in Victoria to contain the growing outbreak there. The cases are linked to a family who returned to Victoria from New South Wales and a crew of removalists. The removalists from New South Wales were doing a job in Victoria and they were not wearing masks. Case numbers have now grown to 11 in Victoria. That includes a person who attended an AFL game at the MCG. The state is now considering a lockdown of at least 3 days. So we apologise to Victoria, because when we had cases from Victoria coming into New South Wales, we were all filthy about it then, and you can understand why they'll be filthy this morning, knowing that there are cases from New South Wales that have entered Victoria. 131873, the open line number. The federal speaker, Tony Smith, has revealed that he will retire from politics. Tony Smith is the longest-serving member for the federal seat of Casey. He says, I believe now is a good time to give the Liberal Party and the people of Casey the opportunity for renewal. He was elected to Parliament 20 years ago before becoming the Speaker in 2015. He's a thoroughly decent bloke, Tony Smith, and I think that everyone on every side of politics is agreeing that he's done a great job as Speaker. He occasionally gets under the skin of Prime Minister Scott Morrison when he pulls the PM into line. The PM is the boss, apart from when he's in the House. When he's in the House, the Speaker runs the show. And Tony Smith hasn't been afraid from time to time of reminding Scott Morrison that the Speaker's in charge and even the PM needs to follow the Speaker's instructions. So congratulations to Tony Smith. I'll also detail what's happened with the strawberries that had the needles inside them. Remember that? It led to the entire industry falling apart in 2018. Well, now charges have been dropped against the farm worker accused of putting the needles in the strawberries. So I'll go through that in some more detail a little later on. Our number 131873. You can send an email, ben@2gb.com, and the text line is up and running, 0460 873 873. If you'd like to win a couple of Spinally's pillows this morning, I am here to help. Each pillow is valued at $219, so I can give you two of them after 8 o'clock when you listen out for this. And when you hear that alarm clock going off after 8 a.m, you call the prize line, 1300 722 873. Caller number 10 this morning will win the pillows, thanks to our mates at Spinally's. The best pillow in the world, spinaleze.com.au. 5 to 6. How you hanging in there? Doing okay? We've got a few more weeks of this to go, maybe a little bit longer. Isn't it good spending time with the people you love? Unless you're living alone. You know, there's a lot of people who live on their own at the moment. It must be really trying for those people. So if you fall into that category and you just need someone to talk to, 131873. I've got James Willis with me in the studio, so if you don't want to talk to me, you can talk to him. Now, did you hear a bit of a bang in the Shire last night? I've got an email here from Lynn in Engadine. It came through last night. Ben, what's happening in the Shire? Huge explosions, shaking my windows. Is it the army? Is it from Lucas Heights? Please tell us what's going on. Well, we might need a bit of help from people in the Shire. From what I can see on local Facebook pages, people were feeling something or hearing something around Caringbah, Sutherland, Kareela, Loftus, and some thought it sounded like helicopters flying throughout the night. So there may be some military training going on. It could be linked to Holsworthy. We've asked some questions of defence, but we're yet to hear back. So did you hear something? How loud was it? Any ideas what's going on? We are trying to do some digging this morning. Now, this is not good for the farmers involved. The woman accused of putting needles into strawberries has walked free. You may remember the industry fell apart back in 2018 after needles were deliberately put into punnets of Queensland strawberries. It sparked a national crisis. And now charges have been dropped against the farm worker. Mai Ut Trin had been charged with 8 counts of contaminating goods with intent to cause economic loss. It's alleged that Trin stuck needles into strawberries while working on a berrylicious farm in Caboolture. She was meant to face a 4-week trial in the Brisbane District Court, but that trial will not go ahead. The prosecution has dropped the charges. They believe it was unlikely that she would have been convicted. Outside of court, her lawyer said Miss Tring felt it was complete vindication. So it's all over. Nobody found responsible. Nobody made to pay the price. The poor old farmers had their livelihood smashed to pieces because some freak somewhere put needles into strawberries.
You're listening to Sydney's best breakfast, Ben Fordham Live. And now, a sports update.
James Willis is here. State of Origin Game 3. So close for the Blues, but they just couldn't get there.
Queensland really improved, Ben. Their defence was a lot better, and I think, to be honest, we missed the Penrith halves in Cleary and Luai the most. Thrilling finish. Latrell Mitchell, as you said, a chance to level the scores at the end. His penalty goal from 50 metres out fell short, and Queensland winning by 2 points. The Dragons took a Ben Hunt, was awesome for Queensland. Kalen Ponga made a difference. I've got to say, though, the referee, there's some real disappointment in Sutton after last night. There were 22 penalties and 6 to goes combined. Now, you'd never have under the old system 22 penalties in a game, so I don't know what he was doing last night.
Are you saying we were robbed?
No, I'd never say that. I think it's really hard to win 3 in a row, but the fact that we're mentioning the referee this morning is not good. You should always forget who refereed.
Okay, this is the moment on the continuous call team when Latrell Mitchell had a penalty goal attempt from 50 out.
Here it is. He kicks it. It's looking pretty good in flight. It's straight between the uprights. It's over. No!
Under.
Just short of the bar. Just short of the bar it is.
Not quite. Now the British Golf Open about to get underway.
Yeah, this is on this afternoon, the next major in golf, Royal St George in Kent, England. Arguably the toughest course in the rotation of the Open. There's 11 Aussies in the field, and there's been a red-hot few weeks. Min Lu Wee winning the Scottish Open, Lucas Herbert the Irish Open, plus Leishman, Cameron Smith-Day. That's on this afternoon.
News is next at 6 o'clock.
People you know. Opinions that matter. News you can trust. This is Breakfast with Ben Fordham on Sydney's 2GB.
131873, the open line number, ben at 2gb.com if you'd like to email, and the text line is up and running, 0460 873 873. You may have just heard Nat mention during the news, masks are again mandatory indoors for Victorians following the latest COVID outbreak. So this has just been announced this morning. And obviously they've got a worry there in Victoria. It's believed there are now 11 positive cases in Melbourne. It all started when a group of removalists from Sydney did a job in Victoria. They were not wearing masks. There's also cases linked to a family that returned to Victoria from New South Wales. So in a matter of days, COVID has spread. And now the outbreak has reached 2 schools. One is Barwon Heads Primary. That's in the state southwest. The other, Bacchus March Grammar in Melbourne's west. Another infectious person went to the footy at the MCG. He went to the Carlton Geelong game and sat in the members' reserve section. So there are now more than 50 exposure sites in Melbourne, including the G. The Victorian government is now considering a snap 3-day lockdown, and they have just announced that masks are now mandatory indoors for all Victorians.
Sydney's best breakfast, Ben Fordham Live on 2GB.
Now, there's an unwanted visitor on Australia's doorstep, and I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about this Chinese spy ship. It's floating off Queensland. It's here apparently to keep an eye on training exercises between Australia and America. Defence Minister Peter Dutton says, yeah, we knew they were coming. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison says we should be wary, but they're in an area they're allowed to be, and we're keeping a close eye on it. Liberal MP Dave Sharma has hit the nail on the head. He says, well, this is hardly the behaviour of a friendly nation. Michael Shoebridge is a national security expert at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Michael, thanks for waking up early and talking to us. Good morning.
Oh, no trouble, Ben. Great to talk to you.
Do we need to be worried?
We need to be focused about this, and we need to see it for what it is. This is an unfriendly Navy collecting intelligence on our peak exercise, not just with the Americans, but with about 6 other friendly partner nations.
How do they collect evidence or information while we're conducting these training drills?
Well, this ship is like a giant electromagnetic vacuum cleaner. So everything that is transmitted, whether it's radio or radar or communication between a missile and a ship or between ships and aircraft, that's all an electronic emission. And this ship is a giant vacuum cleaner for all of that.
Scott Morrison says, of course, we watch them and they're watching us. So is that a fair position to have? He also points out that many nations do similar things in the South China Sea.
Well, it is a fair point, but I think we've got to realise this exercise is more real than it would be without that Chinese military vessel floating around, because operating against that kind of vessel is exactly what part of this exercise needs to make our Navy and our American partner and others able to do in real conflict. So unfortunately, it's the Chinese helping us make this exercise more realistic.
If you believe in freedom of navigation in international waters, I suppose we're not in a position just to tell them to get nicked?
Well, in fact, it's helpful to have the Chinese Navy having to use the rules that it's busily breaking at will in the South China Sea when it operates closer to us. It's having to abide by the international rules that it's breaking every day in the South China Sea.
And I guess a few years ago we wouldn't have been so caught up with the whole thing, but these days, considering that China has made it clear that they won't be bullied, they've threatened Australia, they've done all sorts of things to our industries, and they've also made it clear that if anyone mucks around with China that they will fight back with force. At the moment we are sensitive, quite rightly.
Well, yes, because military affairs are about not just the capabilities that others have, but also about their intentions to use them against our interests. And unfortunately, the Chinese have capability, and recently they've been showing intent to use things against our interests. So it means a lot more this year than it did, say, when they did it back in 2019.
Okay, they can watch us and we'll watch them. Michael Shoebridge, nice to talk to you. Thanks for jumping on the line.
Thanks, Ben.
National security expert at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Michael Shoebridge. Grant says, hi, Ben, the Chinese ship is probably doing its 14-day quarantine before coming closer. They wouldn't want to upset one of their own, the Premier of Queensland. Now in Fairfield, Sam is on the line, just driving down Hamilton Road in Fairfield West. I looked down Maud Street towards the 24-hour testing clinic and I could actually see the end of the street. Things are looking better in regards to the waiting time. Have a great morning. Good on you, Sam. Thanks for keeping us in the loop. Coming up, former President George Bush says it was a mistake to withdraw from Afghanistan. Harley Carnes has got all the details coming up. Right now it's coming up to 14 minutes past 6. It's 15 degrees on the coast, 14 in the west, partly cloudy today, and a top of 21.
Sydney's best breakfast. Email Ben now at 2gb.com.
131873. Harley Carnes coming up from the US in just a moment. The health advice around AstraZeneca has changed again. The Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, ATAGI, has given us yet another update. They say if people under 60 can't get Pfizer, then AstraZeneca's okay if you're in a hot spot in the middle of an outbreak. How many times can they change the advice? We have more AstraZeneca than we know what to do with. We're now exporting it because other countries can't get enough of it. But in Australia, it has been completely undermined. Medical leaders have trashed its reputation. After it was approved here in March, in April, the government warned AstraZeneca was only recommended for people over 50. Then they changed it again to people over 60. That was despite the fact that the risk from dying from a blood clot was about the same as a lightning strike. And then you had the Queensland Chief Health Officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, saying she didn't want young people dying from AstraZeneca. The Prime Minister then said, you can get AstraZeneca at any age if you talk to your GP. Now the immunisation experts at ATAGI have changed their advice again. They now say regardless of your age, if you're living in a hot spot and you can't get Pfizer, then AstraZeneca's okay. So stay tuned for the so-called health advice to change yet again next week.
You're listening to Sydney's best breakfast. Ben Fordham Live. And now, the US report.
Well, the president who sent US troops to war in Afghanistan now says it was a mistake to withdraw them after 20 years. Harley Carnes, good morning.
Yeah, George W. Bush. He thus far has been gentle. You could even call him deferential to the Biden administration, abiding by those unwritten rules that past presidents don't really talk about, those who succeed them, whatever, however many, iterations that may be. But you're right. He now says the withdrawal from Afghanistan is a mistake. Bush said he fears that Afghan women and girls will suffer unspeakable harm He said the consequences will be unbelievably bad. And he said the people who we leave behind will be slaughtered. Well, to that end, we're hoping not to leave them behind. This is not at all partisan. Both Democrats and Republicans, I think, absolutely agree, and not just agree, they know that we have to support, we have to help those people who've been our translators, our interpreters, and so forth. We're not talking about a handful of people either. I mean, the U.S. is already beginning evacuating them out of the country. They're going to be fast-tracked for political asylum because it's very, very clear that their life wouldn't be worth a plug nickel. You know, if they're there because the Taliban is resurgent, and they'll kill them. Plain and simple.
We've got a similar thing going on here at the moment in assessing visas of some of the Afghan interpreters and helpers who assisted us in our efforts. Let's have a listen to George Bush.
Is it a mistake, the withdrawal?
I think it is, yeah. Because I think the consequences are going to be unbelievably bad. It seems like they're just going to be left behind to be slaughtered by these very brutal people. And it breaks my heart.
The problem is, Harley, it is in the end inevitable, isn't it? I mean, otherwise, the US and other forces have to stay there forever.
Well, yeah, if we leave, if and when, and the time is coming, certainly in our case very soon, we don't have a choice but to take care of these people. I mean, think of it. There's two sides of this. We on the one hand, we have to, and we're talking potentially tens of thousands of people over 20 years who've helped the U.S. as interpreters and translators. But if we didn't, and we left them there to the bloodbath that would surely follow, would we ever get help in any other country where we don't speak the language ever again? Of course not. The world would take one look at that and say, you can't trust them. They tell you they're going to do all these good things for you. You can't trust them. And it goes for us. It goes for you guys. It goes for all of the coalition forces. If we had people working for us and we don't take care of them, we're dogs. It just won't. It's no good.
You make a very good point, Harley. It makes things difficult going forward. We'll leave it there for today and we'll catch up tomorrow. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, thanks.
Harley
All
Carnes
right,
joining us from the US. And just on this, the federal government says there's a risk of an inside attack. And that's why we can't grant visas to all the Afghans who want to come here. And these are people who helped us, and now their lives are at risk. But the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, and the Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, say they can't all come in because there are some cases which are difficult to accept and some individuals do pose security risks. And they say that there are some in Afghanistan who played both sides at once. So this is a relevant point. It can't be ignored. They say we will not accept applications from Afghans who fought for or who supported the Taliban. I think that's fair enough. And I think we'd expect nothing less. But Ms Payne and Mr Dutton admit that the overwhelming number of Afghans worked with Australia showing courage, loyalty and dedication. They say our message to these people is clear. You supported Australia when we needed you, and we will support you now. And we know that the former Prime Minister John Howard says we have a moral obligation to help these people. There's about 1,000 of them wanting visas, and with risks rising in Afghanistan, there's a push to get them out of danger sooner rather than later. So one idea being floated is that they could be taken to the United Arab Emirates and visa applications could be processed at an Aussie military base there. But then the question arises, what happens to those who have their visas denied? It's a difficult balancing act. And of course, we need to make sure if there were people playing both sides, we can't have them coming into Australia.
This is Ben Fordham Live with Sydney's best breakfast on 2GB 873.
131873, the open line number. Now, some areas of concern for health officials today. Liverpool Hospital is postponing all non-urgent surgery after a patient tested positive. Dozens of staff are now in strict isolation. It's believed the patient is a pregnant mum booked in for a C-section. And there are also some other areas of concern or spot fires. They're in Penrith, Windsor, Belrose, St Ives, Canterbury, Bankstown, Belmore, Rosebery, Roselands, Bayside, St George and the Sutherland Shire. You can add a bakery in Barangaroo, the Strawberry Hills Post Office and a medical clinic in Cabramatta. Fairfield remains the epicentre, with more than 250 cases in that area over the last 7 days. And it's bad news if you live alone in Sydney. The New South Wales Health Minister has ruled out the possibility of a single-person bubble for the rest of the lockdown. So at the moment, intimate or romantic partners are allowed to visit each other, but friends are not. In Victoria, during the extended lockdown, they brought in a single-person bubble rule. So residents who lived alone could nominate one friend or relative to visit in their home while wearing a mask. So it meant that people didn't have to be alone for weeks on end. There are 350,000 people living alone in Greater Sydney. But Brad Hazzard says they won't be bringing in a rule like that here. If you want to catch up with a friend, you can go for a walk together. You can only go to each other's homes if you are in a relationship. How do they define a relationship? Well, they wouldn't even dare. They don't even know how to define what an essential worker is.
Just a little bit of history repeating.
You're listening to Sydney's best breakfast, Ben Fordham Live. And now, on this day.
Today is July 15. The Commonwealth Bank opened on this day in 1912, with the Prime Minister Andrew Fisher making the first deposit of £1. Kathy Freeman announced her retirement on this day in 2003. Remember this from the 2000 Olympics?
1:10 to go, and Catherine Freeman exploded to the lead now. Lorraine Graham comes out after her. Catherine Murray there as well. 50 to go. Here's her date with destiny. This wonderful young woman surges away. She's going to win a gold. It's 100 gold to Australia and a gold medal to Kathy Freeman.
Oh, yeah, feels like we're still there. Love you, Kathy. It's been 15 years since the launch of Twitter. The company's now worth $4 billion with 6,000 tweets sent every second. Happy birthday to Steve Mortimer, the rugby league legend, who's 65. Hope you're going okay, Turvey. He was recently diagnosed with dementia. In 1972, Elton John's album Honky Chateau went to the top of the charts, and it featured this hit.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man that think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man, burning out his fuse out here alone.
Oh, yeah, it was the first of 7 number one albums for Elton, 49 years ago today. It all happened on this day, July 15. Now, Jock says, any chance I can get a 5:30 club cap and coffee mug? It's on its way to you, Jock. And Michelle says, I'm thinking of little Luca. Can you give us an update, please? Yes, my little mate Luca, the son of my cousin Tori. He's still in hospital, Michelle. He's been there since November 29 last year. And he's kind of gone up and down. He has some days where he shows a lot of promise, other days where he's not so flash. So Tori has done an incredible job, my beautiful cousin, looking after Luca, and it's hard during these times with COVID when you can't have too many visitors. News is next at 6:30.
Opinions that matter. News you can trust. This is Ben Fordham Live on Sydney's 2GB.
131873, the open line number, ben@2gb.com if you'd like to send an email, and the text line is up and running, 0460 873 873. Get to Peter Switzer, our money man, in just a moment. And he's telling us this morning about Apple that could be entering the buy now, pay later market and compete with Afterpay. He's coming up, Peter Switzer. Just on business, the feedback from business is flooding in. Our contacts have spent the last 24 hours going through the details of this rescue package, and the general consensus from business is we appreciate the help, but it's nowhere near enough. And they are fearful of how long the lockdown will go for. More than 20% of businesses only have a few weeks of cash flow left, and remember, their shops are often mortgaged against their home. And here are the main concerns that we're hearing. The package offers significantly less than the first lockdown last year. Last year, they received a $50,000 payment for payroll. And they could also give their staff $1,500 a fortnight for JobKeeper. There were 1.2 million workers in New South Wales on JobKeeper in 2020, and there's no JobKeeper this time around. Businesses can get a $15,000 grant, but applications don't open until July 19, which is the start of week 4 of the lockdown. And we're also being warned that the system could be open to rorting because bosses can falsely reduce hours on their books. So you could say to the staff, okay, you can apply for the $600 federal payment for lost work, but then still ask the workers to do the extra hours. And this is what we're being warned by people running businesses. The rent issue is a massive one. Landlords aren't allowed to kick out tenants during the lockdown, but unlike last year, there's no mandatory rent reduction. Some of these businesses have made no money for 3 weeks now. Hairdressers, gyms, pubs and restaurants, they've all been forced to close. There's not a cent of compensation for them. Hairdresser Leah is paying for 7 salons in Sydney that she can't even use. The printer Philip Joel has lost 90% of his income. He says the only way we're going to survive is by going into more debt. And the only people that will do well out of this are the liquidators. And the bills just keep on coming in. Michelle runs Love Fish restaurant in Barangaroo. She got an electricity bill this week for $6,000. Jan runs Cafe Sydney at Circular Quay. She says, I don't know how hospitality can come back after this. So it is desperate, and they want to hang in there. They're trying to hang in there. But let's be real, how long can they hang in? And the hardest part of all of this, it's not their fault. They're in the position they're in because of ridiculous rules that allowed a limo driver to transport airline crew. He wasn't vaccinated, and despite his claims to the contrary, police do not believe he was wearing a mask. So what's happened to him? Nothing, because the health orders did not require him to be vaccinated or to wear a mask. They were just guidelines. So to all of those business people, keep your stories coming in, and we will keep on fighting for you.
The Business Report, thanks to Latrobe Financial, Australia's multi-award-winning wealth manager.
Well, Apple is eyeing off buy now, pay later, teaming up with Goldman Sachs to prepare a rival product, and it's got Afterpay worried, apparently. Peter Switzer from switzer.com.au. Good morning, Switz.
Yeah, hi, Ben. Yeah, and investors were worried yesterday. Afterpay fell about 10%, Zip a little bit more than that, and they're the two big players in the market. And Apple's basically doing this to make it really easy for their tens of millions of customers to buy Apple products. So they probably won't take on Afterpay and Zip in all the markets. But then PayPal's coming into the market as well, and it'll be everywhere. And where Afterpay charges 4% to retailers to basically provide the service, PayPal's going to cut it to 2.6%. It's a big drop. And then CBA's joining the competition soon as well with a 1% offer. So this is going to be a much tougher environment for Afterpay and Zip, and that's why the share price fell. What's also interesting, Ben, is that the boss of Zip said, well, these guys are coming, but what they're going to actually do is grow the whole buy now, pay later space, so it won't be just young people. And the interesting thing is that young people who do use these services, they don't really like banks. And I guess they don't like banks because I heard their parents complain about banks for years.
And they want everything now, and that's what we've now become accustomed to. What are the markets doing?
Yeah, Dow Jones up 44 points to 34,933. The Aussie dollar is 74.82 US cents.
We'll catch you tomorrow, Switz.
Thanks, mate.
Peter Switzer from switzer.com.au and growyourbusiness.com.au. So remote learning will continue in Sydney for at least 2 more weeks. After the New South Wales government moved to extend those stay-at-home orders, parents and educators continue to raise the alarm about the impact that homeschooling will have on HSC. The New South Wales Education Standards Authority has ruled out cancelling the HSC completely, but says some practical exams may not proceed as normal. So Gladys Berejiklian says she'll look at a return to face-to-face schooling if the case numbers improve over the next 2 weeks. But I'm keen to hear from parents about HSC trials because this has become a big deal. The decision has been left with the schools as to whether to leave the HSC trials where they are or to push them back. So many schools have pushed them back. Others are going ahead as normal. And you've got parents at the schools that are going ahead as normal saying, well, hang on a moment, does that not give an advantage to the students who've got extra time to study?
This is Sydney's Best Breakfast with Ben Fordham on 2GB.
Thanks for tuning in. Weather-wise, partly cloudy today. A little warmer than we've had previous days to kick off your Thursday morning. It's 16 degrees on the coast, 14 in the west, partly cloudy today and a top of 14. The sun will be up at 7 a.m. Just on this Chinese ship off the coast of Queensland, we'll talk to Barnaby Joyce about that, the Deputy Prime Minister, at 7:15. But it is another case of double standards from Beijing, because they have taken a very dim view in the past when we have ventured into the South China Sea. Much of it isn't theirs, of course, even though they claim it is. Aussie forces have operated regularly in the South China Sea for more than a century. Our involvement there dates back to World War I, but more recently we've been part of this Indo-Pacific endeavour. We run exercise with regional neighbours in and around the South China Sea, and China does not always appreciate us being there, but at the moment they're sitting off Queensland. So we'll catch up with Barnaby Joyce when he's live at 7:15. Scott Morrison makes the point that we watch them and they watch us. And at the moment we've got military exercises with America, and China is obviously keeping a close eye on that.
You're listening to Sydney's Best Breakfast. Ben Fordham Live. And now, the UK Report.
Well, police have now tracked down some of the grubs who racially abused the England football players following the Euros loss. Adam Gilchrist, they've got them.
Yeah, well, certainly some of them. I can't think it's all of them. They've got 4 so far. 4 arrests have been made. Police have been trawling through these social media posts, but frankly, it's probably hundreds of horrible racist nutters who put stuff out there on social media. But still, if they are slowly but surely finding them, and then ultimately, as Boris Johnson suggests, banning them from football grounds for life, being disowned by the England football team. Gareth Southgate has said they're not managers. And Jadon Sancho, one of the England players who got abused, he's a wonderfully gifted player, though we've not seen him fully in England yet. He's been playing in Germany for some time. As he put it, he's a very clever bloke. Hate will never win, but society must do better, as he put it. So he's absolutely right, is that it's good that we're having this debate, it's good that it's out there, but it doesn't actually solve the problem, does it?
It's not always easy to track people down online either. Interesting that Boris Johnson says any fan caught up in this will be banned from going to the football for life. Now, you've got a new study about forgetfulness.
Yes, and the deal is they were looking at laboratory rats, but what goes for lab rats may well go for human beings, is the suggestion there. The University of Bradford in Yorkshire wants to carry out more tests. But what they've done is they've carried out some, as they put it, photo period tests on rats and found that a lack of daylight leads to short-term memory loss. So translate that across, and therefore you don't just have seasonal effectiveness disorder, you have seasonal memory loss, short-term memory loss. So, in other words, Ben, if right now you can't find your wallet or your keys, or you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, it's because it's winter and you've got an excuse.
Oh, well, there you go. You're making me feel better all of a sudden. We'll catch up tomorrow, Adam. Thanks so much, mate.
Cheers, Ben.
Adam Gilchrist joining us from the UK. On the text line, Mary says, please keep highlighting the negligence of the limousine driver. Regardless of his denials, he is responsible for the current debacle and should not be allowed to forget it. What an irresponsible act. People need to be reminded of who is responsible and what can result from one simple act. Well, yes, Mary, you're right. It did all start from the limo driver, but then again, as police have pointed out, they couldn't prosecute him because they couldn't establish that the health orders were in place to force him to be vaccinated, to force him to wear a mask. Now, he was required under the health orders to go and get a daily swab, which he didn't do. But then again, police were having trouble proving that he knew that he had to do that under the health orders. So, yes, he's responsible, but so are the people who put those lame health orders in place. 131873, the open line number. Jeff wants to talk about the lockdown. Good morning to you, Jeff.
G'day, mate. We need to get back to work. Small business is dying. A lot of people are going to probably already gone under. We're borrowing money from our children and our grandchildren. Instead of arguing over these handouts, we need to get back to work.
Yeah, look, we do need to get back to work. We can't stay locked up forever, Jeff. I suppose immediately the concern is people not wanting to give the virus to their mum, their dad, their auntie, their uncle, their grandma and their grandpa. So that is a concern at the moment. We don't think that this strain of the virus is as deadly as we've seen in the past, but it does move faster than what we've seen in the past. And we've certainly spoken to people who've had it, and it's not pretty. You've got people who've described being absolutely floored, like they were hit by a bus, non-stop vomiting, different side effects and symptoms depending on the patient. So no one wants that. I don't know anyone who's saying, all right, well, look, I'll put my hand up and I'll be the first to get this strain of the virus. But we can't remain locked up forever. And based on figures in the budget, net debt will come in at about $1,617 billion this year. So 617 billion this year, climbing to hit about $1 trillion by 2025. And that's about $40,000 for every man, woman and child. And that's before we factor in the latest support packages. It doesn't include the Sydney lockdown. So you are right, we will be paying off this for decades. After the break, we'll catch up with a mum whose daughter is doing the HSC.
Sydney's best breakfast. Email Ben now at 2gb.com.
On the text line, hi Ben, this virus has proved it's too fast for government. The left doesn't know what the right is doing. Let me talk to Emma because, Emma, you've got a daughter doing Year 12 in the HSC. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. I certainly do. And honestly, it is just the uncertainty that is messing with these kids' heads. They've got to make a decision. Either the trials go ahead or they don't. I mean, we were told the other week, yeah, schools will definitely go back, so they get themselves all pumped up for that. She studied the whole holidays for the trials. The trials get kicked out 2 more weeks. Okay, she can accept that. Then yesterday we get locked down again, another 2 weeks, and it's just very hard to keep these kids up and, you know, focused, and she's just devastated.
So the trials were due to start on July 26. Schools are now closed until July 30. There are about 500 schools who've postponed their trials by 2 weeks to give students more time and more certainty, but not every school has. What's your school done?
So our school has put them on the 2nd of August, which would mean she would go back to school effectively the day that the trials start, which is fine. She can cop that, but I don't think that there's a guarantee that that's actually going to happen. And I think if we can open shops that are not necessarily essential services and have things operating that are not necessarily essential, I think having the opportunity to do your trials and do your HSC when you've worked so hard for them is essential.
Yeah.
Surely we can put something in place. The strategists can do something to ensure that these kids just have the certainty. And it's not like when you and I were kids where you might just talk to your best mate on the phone. They're in chat rooms all talking to each other, building each other up into a damn frenzy, getting each other all, overly stressed. There's things on the NESA site now that say that the trials may not go ahead, and if they don't, they'll be estimating their marks. That's not great for all kids. My kid's a high achiever. She's worked really hard. She's got good marks, but she wants the opportunity to put that on the paper like everyone else has had before her. She said to me last night, what's the point, Mum? What's the point?
Yeah, well, look, I'm hearing you. Just hang on there, Emma. We'll hang on to your details if we can, because it might be worth having a yarn to your daughter at some stage, because this makes up a chunk of your final score, the HSC trials. Now, we've spoken to the Education Minister, Sarah Mitchell. She can't formally change the date of the HSC trials. It's controlled by NESA, the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. They have to make a call, but NESA says it's up to individual schools. So you may have some kids forced to do one thing while others have the option of doing another when it's supposed to be a level playing field. Not a lot of certainty there.
A sports update brought to you by Didi's Waterfront Group. Book now at didisgroup.com.au.
Queensland too good in State of Origin Game 3, 20-18 over New South Wales. Good morning, James Willis.
Good morning, Ben. Only just, and I think it was a matter of centimetres. Latrell Mitchell had a penalty goal from 50 metres out to draw scores with about a minute left, and it fell short. So the Queensland side win 20 points to 18. New South Wales claimed the series. Tom Trbojevic, the Wally Lewis Medal for Player of the Series. And I think it's fair to say this won't go down as the best Blues team ever. They'll fall just short. Gus Gould's 96 team for mine, the best ever.
British Open Golf starting this afternoon.
Yeah, 11 Aussies in the field. Royal St George in Kent, England. This is where Greg Norman won in the early 90s. And we've got a stack of players in form. Looking forward to this teeing off this afternoon, the latest golfing major.
Thank you, mate. Talk next hour.
Thank you, Ben.
At 7:15 this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Barnaby Joyce.
Now on 2GB, Ben Fordham Live. Sydney's best breakfast.
Morning, it's Thursday, July 15. A warmer start to the morning this morning. Right now, 16 degrees in the city, 14 in the west, partly cloudy today, and a top of 21. I think you probably know by now that the lockdown has been extended. So we're in this situation a little bit longer, maybe 2 more weeks. It could be even longer. It all depends on how many people are out in the community while infectious. Now, we do have some good news coming in. The proportion of Australians above the age of 16 who are fully vaccinated has just hit 12%. So 33% have had one dose, 12% have had both. So that's good news. There's also some good news coming out of Fairfield. There's no queue at the Endeavour Sports Ground testing clinic in Fairfield this morning. A big contrast to what we've seen in the last 24 hours. At the Fairfield Showground, it is busy but moving.
And now, Ben Fordham comments for Dilmah Tea. It's 100% pure Ceylon tea. What's your cuppa?
There's an interesting comment that slipped into the public arena yesterday. It was allegedly said by the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet, although he says he cannot recall saying it. He didn't say it, he just can't recall. It's been claimed that Dominic Perrottet suggested to the New South Wales Chief Health Officer Kerry Chant that she should take a pay cut. Apparently he said it late last year, although he can't recall ever saying it. The comment, we're told, was based on further lockdowns, and the conversation reportedly took place during the Northern Beaches lockdown over Christmas. Dr. Chant wanted the lockdown to continue for another week. The Treasurer is accused of telling Dr. Chant that she should give up 5% of her salary if we have further lockdowns. And it raises an interesting point. Why aren't our politicians sharing the pain? Because as of now, they have not surrendered a cent. Businesses are going under. The public service remains on full salary. What happened to we're all in this together? Now, for the record, I don't think Kerry Chant should be the one to take a pay cut. She's barely had a day off in the past 16 months. And she's not the one responsible for the lazy health orders and being slow to make decisions. She provides the advice and the politicians make the decisions. Last year during New Zealand's lockdown, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister in NZ, gave up 20% of her wage for 6 months. She made her cabinet ministers and chief public servants do exactly the same. She said it was about leadership and solidarity. India's politicians took a 30% pay cut for all of 2020. Singapore cancelled bonuses for public servants and slashed their wages for a month. But Australia? Nothing. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott has weighed into this. He says every well-paid bureaucrat and MP should agree to a 20% wage reduction. He says we have a private sector calamity, but no public servant has lost their job or their income. And he's right. There are 120 fat cats in New South Wales earning between $250,000 and $600,000 a year. So let's start with them. There are 25 in Canberra earning more than $1 million a year. The NBN paid out $73 million worth of bonuses just last year, all taxpayers' money. But more importantly, who pays for the mistakes? Not the politicians, not the public servants. We had the Ruby Princess tragedy, where well-paid advisors and so-called experts thought it was okay to unload a ship with COVID on board. 28 people died because of that mistake. It sent the virus right around the country. You've got the limo driver at the airport who spread the virus all over Sydney. He didn't have to be vaccinated. He didn't have to wear a mask under the weak public health orders. They were only guidelines. He got infected and Sydney's locked down indefinitely. Zero accountability. And remember the hotel quarantine bungle in Victoria? That cost the health minister in Victoria her job. Same with 2 senior bureaucrats. They lost their gigs too. It was a massive stuff-up and people paid the price. They lost their jobs in Victoria, but not in New South Wales. So who will be the first politician or senior public servant to agree to a pay cut? They did it in New Zealand. They did it in India. So who's going to be the first to volunteer here in New South Wales? 131873. The open line is open to any politicians or senior public servants who want to be the first to put up their hand. Now, what about this? When's a shark attack not a shark attack? It may sound like a bizarre question. I suppose a shark attack isn't a shark attack when you're not being attacked by a shark. But if it's trying to eat you, it's a shark attack, right? Well, that's what we thought. But a shark researcher called Dr. Leonardo Guida has a different interpretation. Dr. Guida from the Marine Conservation Society believes that calling shark attacks is alarmist. He says we should tone it down. Another researcher, Christopher Pepper-Neff from Sydney University, says we should be calling them shark incidents. And gradually, official bodies are trying to protect the sharks with political correctness. I don't think they know about political correctness, the sharks. The Department of Primary Industries in New South Wales is moving away from the term shark attack. They want them to be called shark incidents or interactions. Interactions. Now, can you imagine someone fighting off a shark, covered in blood, they've lost half the surfboard, and someone says, mate, what happened? Oh, I had an interaction with a shark. In Queensland, the Shark Smart website now calls them negative encounters. What planet are these people on? A shark attack is a shark attack. And I think we ought to know, in 2020, Australia topped the list with 8 fatalities, not 8 incidents or 8 negative encounters or any other PC language you want to insert into the sentence. They were 8 fatal shark attacks. And I can guarantee you one thing, there's no political correctness in the wild. And if a shark is about to attack, nobody cares what it's called. Coming up, Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. It's 7:15.
This is Ben Fordham Live with Sydney's best breakfast on 2GB 873.
Your thoughts coming on pollies and public servants taking pay cuts during lockdowns. Weather-wise, 16 degrees on the coast at the moment, 14 in the west, partly cloudy and a top today of 21. Now, this is one to watch. There is a Chinese surveillance ship floating right now off the Queensland coast. The ship is spying on war games involving Australia, America, Japan, Canada, South Korea and New Zealand. The UK is involved as well. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says we know they're there and we're keeping a close eye on it. Barnaby Joyce is the Deputy Prime Minister. He's on the line. Barnaby, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben. Good morning, Sydney. Good morning, all 2GB listeners.
This is a bit too close for comfort, isn't it?
Yeah, well, hello. This is a new world we live in. And, you know, I think the embassy's already complained about me, Chinese embassy. We've got to understand we live in a new global dynamic. And that's why I always say we've got to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible, put other sides with the distractions away and realise that this is, why are they watching us? You know, what are they doing there? And, of course, we can't do anything about it, to be quite frank. They can sit out in international waters and do their job. But, you know, that's one section of them listening. And there are other sections where they listen and they try to hack in. And, you know, they have computers that will basically try and break into our computers, into our secret areas, into our communication networks. And if you know, what we should be doing is understanding that this all emanates to what is interesting about Australia. I can tell you right now, it's not your insurance industry, probably not even your banking industry. What's very interesting to the world is your iron ore, your coal, which everybody thinks, oh, well, you know, we'll shut that down and magically still have the same economy that we've got at the moment. Your gas, you know, your vital agricultural exports, and your alliances, and how closely and how well your platform with the United States, because Talisman Sabre is the exercise that's going on there at the moment. I was up in that area at the start of the week. How well your platforms work together in comparison to their platforms, their military platforms, and how well your communication is working out. Now, why were they worried about that?
Well, now, when you talk about other ways of them accessing our information, we've got two of our biggest energy providers that are Chinese-owned. Energy Australia, 1.7 million customers. Alinta Energy, 1.1 million customers. They're both Chinese-owned. So there's another way that they can access our personal information.
Well, isn't it funny? In the past, they wanted to buy Rio. Chinalco wanted to buy Rio. And I had both sides of Parliament at that time thinking it was a great idea, you know, because the world's a beautiful free place. And nobody ever is going to do anything nasty. And I was a bigot, I was a racist, and I was a redneck, and I was a xenophobe. Now I'm just correct. And you've got to live in this world. China's still going to be your biggest trading partner. You've got to work with that. but he can only work from a position of strength. And when you're in a position of strength, you have a much better relationship with people. If you're in a position of weakness, and weakness is, especially if they've got a vast section, already own vast sections of your assets. And remember, the way the national interest of China is perceived by China is the national interest doesn't have to reside in China. It's anywhere that they own something. And so it's, this is why I think we've got to get cracking. We've got to have the strongest agricultural industry we can. We've got to have the strongest mining industry we can. If we make money from selling camel dung, that's what we're going to have, camel dung. If we make money from selling coal, you damn well sell coal.
Well, just on that, let me jump in. There's this plan that's being floated by the Australian energy market to have Australia's energy grid capable of handling 100% renewables in just 4 years. At the moment, we're only powered a fraction by renewable energy. How do you get to 100% in 4 years?
That's God giving you an answer that's above my head. That is just madness. It is so crazy. Renewables have a section, but it's like talking about a car that runs down from Katoomba down the Blue Mountains. You say, this car is so efficient. It's got all the way to Penrith, hardly used any fuel. And then you say, well, turn it around and run it back up the hill again, mate. And, of course, I say, oh, no, it doesn't do that. And you say, well, you're comparing the down the hill car with the car, the coal-fired power station, which goes 24/7 up the hill to Katoomba, down the hill to Katoomba, around Katoomba, and this is why, and that's what they call base load. See, anything when it's available, when the so-called sun's shining and the wind's blowing, runs downhill very well. But where it comes unstuck is when you've got to try and send it up the other hill, and you say, I'll do it with a big electric battery. Well, the biggest electric battery won't even get you halfway up the hill, won't get you a quarter of the way up the hill, won't get you even an eighth of the way up the hill. So then you have something like pump hydro, and that's inordinately expensive, like building a big new dam where half the power you use is just to push the water up the hill. For what you lose 50% in pump hydro, and when you add the pump hydro to your wind towers and to your solar farms, then the cheapest way to get power up to those build yourself a new coal-fired power station.
As you know, a lot of people have got the power on at the moment because we're stuck at home and we've got heaters on during winter. Just on lockdowns, Tony Abbott is suggesting that any well-paid bureaucrat or MP should agree to a 20% wage reduction during lockdowns. Do you agree?
Well, no, I don't. Why? Because I'm here in Tamworth and I've had a business meeting going since 6:30. I've just left it to do this. And we've got to. I don't expect politicians to be doing 20% less work. I expect them to be doing more work. And I'm at the back end of a political career, but you always come up with this. We're going to fix a problem by basically paying people less. Now, get them to do a better job. I want our politicians to be the most competent people in the business sector. I want them to have an experience of having run their own business and been through the privations of that. And trying to get someone, I'm looking across the road at the Tamworth City Toilet. I don't know who owns that, but I bet you he's pretty smart. I want that person, whoever it is, to go into politics. And if I don't give him something that attracts him to go into politics at the bottom end, he probably won't. And now you're going to need Boilermakers, fitters and turners and all that as well. And even a few of them will say, well, mate, to this, for what I get, a few years, 5, 6 years as a politician, maybe 7, that's about the average term. And then I give up my business. And when I go back, half the town's not going to like me because I was on the wrong side of the political fence to them. And, I've got to try and work out whether this is worthwhile. And if I don't get those people, I'm just going to get ex-staffers of politicians. And, that they're nice people as well. But you're getting union officials, you're getting middle-tier solicitors, you're getting ex-staffers. And what we need in Australia are businessmen, businesswomen, people who have run small businesses, people who have basically done a hard day's work in the sun, and you've got to attract them in because they're not there for a full-time job in perpetuity.
All right,
Many of them are there for 7 or 8 years. So there's my answer.
You get back to work. We'll catch up soon. Thanks for your time.
Good on you, Ben. See you, mate.
Barnaby Joyce. So there's a politician saying no pay cuts. What do the people say? Anna, good morning.
Good morning, Ben. Ben, I agree with you. I think that they should definitely take a pay cut because the Australian people are still paying taxes on our Medicare payments. We're paying taxes on the tolls and the road taxes. Plus, we've got all the car insurance and GSTs on everything. So they definitely should take a pay tax. pay cut.
Well, everyone else is making a sacrifice at the moment, so why don't we share the pain around? Good on you, Anna. Thanks for that. More calls coming. 131873, the open line number. And if you're just waking up and wondering what happened with State of Origin last night, if you weren't watching, Queensland got up just, but New South Wales still wins the series 2-1.
This is Sydney's Best Breakfast with Ben Fordham on 2GB.
131873. Keep the calls quick if you can, because I've got the news coming up, and then I'll take more after 7:30. Vince, go right ahead.
Did I hear that right? That Barnaby Joyce gets up at 6:30 in the morning, and other people get up in the morning with anxiety because they got no work? Is this guy for real? My wife had to leave her job to look after her father that's got dementia, and she's getting $30 a week for carer. I'm sick of that guy.
Well, look, I think that there is a time and a place for politicians to review their salaries, and now is a good time to do it. And I'm more than happy to open up the open line to any politician who wants to put their hand up first. It's not like this hasn't been done. Jacinda Ardern did it in New Zealand. They did it in India as well, 30% pay cuts for all of 2020. Tony Abbott said the same thing should happen here. We've got a private sector calamity, but no public servant has lost their job or their income. So it's over to some of those public servants. Matt, go right ahead.
Yeah, g'day, Ben. Look, I think governments, in regards to lockdown, should compensate every business 100% of what their turnover would be. What this would do would put the accountability back to the government to have a proper strategic measures in place with the virus. And I guarantee they would have it in place, and then the accountability's down. That's what's lacking, the accountability. There's no accountability. And while it's just you can push out money, but 10 cents in the dollar to try to suffice the business going forward, it's not on. And
I know you're working, Matt. I know you're working because I can hear the forklift or whatever that piece of machinery is in the background. It's in reverse. But you're going forward, powering the economy, and good on you for doing so. And I think there's an argument. Look, we're not saying that this is something that should be imposed on the politicians, but if they want to put their hand up, who's going to go first? You're listening to Ben Fordham on 2GB. More calls coming after 7:30.
Bringing you the best at breakfast. This is Ben Fordham Live on Sydney's 2GB.
131873, the open line number. Someone just says here, just caught me on the text line as I was coming out of the break. Sharon says, Ben, 4 words for Barnaby. We're all in this together. And then there's a follow-up text message saying, sorry, 5 words. We know what you mean, Sharon. Good on you. Thank you. You may have heard Nat mentioned during the news there is a staff member at Westmead Hospital who's tested positive to coronavirus. The positive test result was notified yesterday. The staff member who is fully vaccinated is isolating at home. So they're doing all the usual things there at Westmead Hospital. We know that elective surgeries have been postponed at Liverpool after a pregnant patient tested positive. So wards are being told, start focusing on coronavirus. And this is at Liverpool Hospital. And we're being told that hospitals all over New South Wales are now considering ceasing all elective surgery over coming days. There are 71 people in hospital with COVID, 20 in ICU. And we need to remember here, we spent $3 billion last year safeguarding our hospitals against the virus. We've got 1,000 intensive care beds. So far, only 20 of them are being used. And there are other health issues going on. There are 88,000 people waiting for elective surgery. Dr. David Anderson from St Vincent says postponing these surgeries has a real human cost. You could be waiting months in chronic pain. Instead of surgery, these people are living off painkillers for months. And he is expecting that non-urgent surgery will be brushed. And we can't forget the other health problems out there. It's not just COVID, and these other problems can claim lives too. Last year, there were alarming drops in screenings for breast, bowel, and cervical cancer. Those cancers kill thousands of Australians every single year. 3,000 deaths from breast cancer every year. 5,300 from bowel cancer. And there have been 912 COVID deaths since March 2020 in all of Australia. The cancer specialist, Professor Grant MacArthur, says the health impacts of coronavirus are going to be way less than the impacts on other health issues induced by the COVID response. So there you've got two specialists saying don't be too quick to cancel appointments that don't relate to coronavirus. Do we listen to their health advice?
Sydney's best breakfast.
2GB.
Now, Julie says, Ben, why is no one advocating for the release of the Central Coast and Illawarra regions from this lockdown? We have no exposure. Yes, we have commuters, but we've managed to get through every outbreak without issues. Let us out. Our kids need to be at school. Our businesses need to be open. This is a joke. Please help us. Well, look, in Wollongong, I don't think they've had a case in 2 weeks. They haven't. It was 2 weeks ago, I think, that they even had any sign of a problem. And I think you're better off locking people down when there are issues and not locking people down when there are no issues. And if we had have followed that rule earlier on, then the eastern suburbs would have been locked down, just like the northern beaches were locked down, and then the rest of us wouldn't be suffering. And just to be clear, when I'm talking about the push for senior public servants and politicians to take a pay cut, we're not talking about frontline workers like nurses or teachers or bus drivers. We're talking about the fat cats, the people earning up to $600,000 a year in New South Wales or more than $1 million a year in Canberra. Barnaby Joyce says, forget about it. Then again, Barnaby had a pay rise recently. He went from $211,000 as a backbencher to $433,000 as Deputy Prime Minister. And good luck to him. And he's not responsible for any of the mistakes that have been made in New South Wales when it comes to lazy health orders and the lack of localised lockdowns. Lisa's called in. Good morning, Lisa.
Oh, hi, Ben. Thanks for taking my call.
No
of
worries.
course, politicians should be taking a pay cut. You know, they say that they understand the hardship of small business. They've got no idea of the real pain that we are in. Try operating a business on 20% turnover from 2019. That's what most travel agents have been doing for the last 18 months. We're still in bloody lockdown. We still don't know when we're going to get out of it, when confidence is going to be up for people to travel again. You know, of course they should be taking a pay cut. They've got no idea of the pain of small business.
So you're in the travel agent business and you wouldn't have been doing any business for a long time.
Oh, look, I did my pivot in inverted commas, and I've been doing domestic travel. But at my very best for the last 18 months, I've been earning 30% of my 2019 turnover.
Gosh, and,
So,
then you think about, and I know that you would be aware of the fact that there are other businesses out there that can't open at all. If you're running a hair salon or a barber shop or something like that, or a bar or a restaurant that doesn't do takeaway, you can't open at all.
I feel for businesses. I've been doing it for 18 months. My pivot isn't really a pivot. I've been doing the takeaway for 18 months. I'm not earning anywhere near what I was in 2019, and with no end in sight. You know, until we're all vaccinated, until there's some kind of opening up, we're doing this for nothing. We're servicing our clients. We're doing the refunds. We're rescheduling. We're trying to find alternatives for them. You know, of course politicians should be taking a pay cut. They've got no idea of the real pain of small business.
Well,
and I really feel for all these businesses who are doing it at the moment, but feel for travel agents who've been doing it for 18 months.
No doubt about it. We can hear the pain coming through the phone line from you, Lisa. Hang on there. I want to send you a bit of a gift from the 2GB family. When things are back to normal, you'll go off to the Didi's restaurants, any of them around Sydney, all on Sydney Harbour. We'll send you a $200 voucher. I know that doesn't make up for all of your lost business. And I do want to say thanks to the travel agents, because they have been very good at dealing with people. I know when we tried to book our last holiday that was cancelled, they said, look, we won't process any transactions because you just don't know what the future's going to hold. So they are doing their best to look after people. Imagine being a travel agent at the moment. 131873, the open line number. And Rick, he has been hanging on. Let me go to Rick, just on the limo driver. Rick, go right ahead. Good morning.
Just on an infamous limo driver. Where's this bloke's moral responsibility? Ignorance is no defence on this. I hope he's listening to all the pain and suffering that he's caused.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, the rules weren't there in place, but then again, there are some rules that you just don't need to be told. mind you, there were guidelines in place. We need to make clear. He was supposed to be following guidelines that he didn't. And despite everything he says, police do not believe he was wearing a mask. He certainly wasn't vaccinated. He wasn't doing the daily swabs. The rules were too lazy because they weren't in the health orders. But common sense would tell you, you're picking up international flight crew, wear a bloody mask and get vaccinated.
This is Ben Fordham Live with Sydney's best breakfast on 2GB 873.
13 minutes to 8, you're with Ben Fordham on 2GB. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Now let's just check in with our mate Gabby Boyle from 9 News because she's at the Fairfield Showground this morning. I'm guessing it's going to be very different this morning than what we experienced yesterday. Gabby, good morning.
Good morning, Ben. Well, it's not the hot mess we saw yesterday, but it's still not great. We've got people lining up for about an hour and a half this morning, so it's not the 6 or 7 hours that we saw yesterday, but it's still not what people want to do after they've come off a long shift.
Yeah, so yesterday was madness. Today is kind of controlled madness.
Controlled chaos. I went to the Endeavour Sports Ground for my first 2 crosses this morning for the Today Show, and it was great there. They had a much better system set up. They had a huge marquee. They had traffic marshals. They had all flags and a great setup to make sure that everyone was flowing through smoothly and much more people on hand to help out as well. But I think what's happened is because it was such a mess yesterday, everyone's decided to try the showground today, and now we're seeing massive lines here.
Yeah, and so they've expanded the operating hours of a number of these facilities?
Yeah, so 3 locations, the Mounties, the showground here, and the Endeavour Sports Ground are now all 24-hour facilities, which makes sense because a lot of the people out here aren't working regular shifts. They're not knocking off at 5 o'clock. They're knocking off at 2 or 3 in the morning. The roads out here are still busy with people in high vis, people in nurses and medical uniforms. It's buzzing 24/7, so they really need to make sure that they've got the facilities in place to make sure that the people can do the right thing.
Yeah, I've noticed on some of them the operating hours kick off at 8 a.m, and I thought the same thing. Geez, there'd be a lot of tradies in Fairfield who would be at work well before 8 a.m, and it's a hot mess yesterday and not quite a hot mess today. And Gabby, do we define what a hot mess is? Can you explain what that is?
I reckon that those people in the line yesterday would tell you 7 hours in a car without a bathroom, without anything to eat after a 12-hour shift would define that as a hot mess.
Not a problem. We'll catch up soon. Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks, mate.
Gabby Boyle, who does a great job for Channel 9, jumping on the line for 2GB this morning. Now, there's a testing clinic that is chock-a-block on the Central Coast this morning. Wally, g'day, Wal.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Good, mate. Where are you?
I've passed it. That's at Cooleyong, Point Clare, right? Now, every morning it's busy, you know. So everybody up here is doing the right thing. I'm just over these politicians and bureaucrats, mate. We're all doing the right thing. I got a business, and boy, I'm up well before 6:30. You know, so Barnaby, like you ought to get in the real world. They've never had a job, these people.
Yeah. So Point Clare is a really busy site this morning. Is that the bottom line?
Yes. Yep.
All right. What do you do, Wally?
I'm in the marine business.
You're
I'm
in the
an
marine
engineer.
business, an engineer. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. That sounds mysterious.
Mysterious. Well, we do the boats for all the people who've got boats and all that. They can't go anywhere, so business drops off, doesn't it?
And are you above water or underwater?
I'm above water, but I go in the engine rooms a lot. I spend most of my life in the grease and oil.
Yeah. Be nice and warm in there, Wal.
Oh, yes. Cold when you first get in, but warm when it's like being in the saunas. Yep.
All right. Listen, mate, I don't know whether you're on a health kick at the moment or whether you're going to be one down the track. Have you ever tried the man shake?
I haven't never tried the man shake.
All right.
I need all the help I can get, mate. I'm old.
Do you really? All right. Well, why don't I send you a man shake starter pack?
All right, that'd be great.
Good on you, mate. It's
terrific.
from Adam McDougall, who spends plenty of time on the Central Coast, the Newcastle boy, themanshake.com.au. And I've got no idea whether you need it or not, but if you don't need it, you can pass it on to someone else. By the way, what is going on with Bob Catter? I see last night, Bob Catter was posting a video last night ahead of Origin, and everyone's saying he was drinking a bizarre concoction. But I'm just having a look here. A few people have sent this to me. Oh, it's not that bizarre. It's rum and milk. Well, rum and milk is not all that strange. I mean, it might be strange to people who haven't tried rum and milk in Sydney, but there are plenty of Queenslanders who love a rum and milk. And I think he was taking the you-know-what out of Gladys Berejiklian when she posted that photo ahead of another Origin game when she was standing there in her office with a can of Coke looking at a TV screen about 8 hours before the kickoff. So he posted a video last night, and there he was drinking a rum and milk that might be strange to some, but don't knock it till you've tried it.
This is Ben Fordham Live with Sydney's best breakfast on 2GB.
Linda's upset. She says, my daughter was booked in for elective surgery this morning but has been turned away because she's from Bosley Park. That can't be easy, Linda. Roy says Barnaby Joyce is right on the pay cuts, but I've got to tell you, Roy, plenty of other people disagree. Peter's called in. Peter, go right ahead.
Yeah, Ben, I disagree with people asking that politicians shouldn't be taking pay cuts, fat cuts as well. In Victoria last year, Jenny Mikakos fell on her own sword. This year, what have we had in New South Wales so far this year and last year? The Health Minister last Friday giving a tissue to Kerry Chant in a live televised press conference. We had the Ruby Princess. We had elite school students getting vaccinated. We were slow to act on the limo driver regulations and laws, which has caused all of this mess. Only this week we've had haphazard decisions on workers in the Fairfield LGA to get tested every 3 days, and now they've bunned it on and said, it's going to be effective from Saturday. Brad Hazzard, it's time for you, in your very own words that you used last week, it's time for you to move on.
Peter, thank you very much. Mick says, I think the 20% pay reduction in Brad Hazzard's salary would be grossly inadequate. He was Health Minister during Ruby Princess, and now with the airport driver situation, to cop lectures from him every day is more than a bit rich. Paul, your turn. Go right ahead.
Yes, Ben. To these idiots who make these decisions, in regards to only one person to go shopping, from the household, okay, I understand there's, if you're underage, that's all right. But I seen a couple yesterday who pulled into a disabled. They were about 80. You could tell that she could hardly walk, right? But the husband had to let her go into the shops and he go and sit in the car while she went shopping. These older couples, they go shopping by themselves because they help each other. And you got some idiot in the politicians thinking, no, one person per shopping,
Well, I would say on that, Paul, they obviously developed the rules for the greater population, but police officers out there use discretion, and they're not going to go hammering a couple in their 80s because there are people there doing whatever you say they're doing. So just keep in mind that just because the rules are there for everyone, it doesn't mean that police officers follow every single rule to the letter of the law. And just a clarification on the text line, Ben, can you point out to your listeners who seem to hear it wrong? Barnaby said he was in meetings at 6:30, not that he got up at 6:30.
A sports update thanks to the Kia Sorrento, boasting class-leading safety, first-in-class tech, and now winner of Car Sales Car of the Year. Go to kia.com.au.
Take it away, James Willis.
Thank you, Ben. Queensland won the final Origin game last night, 20 points to 18 on the Gold Coast. New South Wales missing Cleary and Luai in the halves. We couldn't get the job done at the end, and Tom Trebojevic named Wally Lewis medal. Not a good night for the referee, Gerard Sutton, either. And also the British Open Golf, the major getting underway this afternoon at Royal St George in Kent, England. This is where Greg Norman won in the early 90s. 11 Aussies in the field. Look forward to that.
Looking forward to it. Good on you, mate. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Thanks, mate.
James Willis there. If you want to win 2 Spinalese pillows in the last hour of the show, listen out for the alarm clock. And when you hear that sound after 8 o'clock, call the prize line. 1300 722 873. Caller number 10 gets the pillows.
This is Sydney's best breakfast with Ben Fordham on 2GB.
131873, the open line number, ben@2gb.com if you'd like to email. And we are giving you the word next week, cash code word, $60,000 to be won. You just write down the 2 cash code words and then wait for the cue to call. You can win $1,000 instantly with Ray, Deb and Jim. $1,000 to give away in every show every weekday. $60,000 all up. It starts next week right here on 2GB.
Ben Fordham comments. For G Brothers Mercedes-Benz Monavale, from their family to yours, you're invited to experience the G Brothers difference.
Well, I think there are plenty of team players in New South Wales. Yes, there are a few bad eggs, but the vast majority are doing the right thing. We're not seeing our mates. We're staying home. We're wearing masks where we're supposed to wear masks, only leaving home for essential reasons. But the last one's a bit of a problem, that word essential. When it comes to essential work, nobody knows what that means. Everyone thinks they're an essential worker, but they don't know. The Prime Minister once said that anyone with a job is an essential worker at a time like this. But New South Wales won't define what an essential worker really is. They flat out refuse to. And they're adding to the confusion because they've all been asked, Gladys Berejiklian, Brad Hazard, Dr. Kerry Chant, and none of them will give the answer. There's no definition of what is and what isn't essential work. And when Victoria locked down, they put out a list naming everyone deemed essential and the circumstances in which they could go to work. If you weren't on the list, you stayed home. No ifs, no buts. Gladys Berejiklian says Victoria's decision to define essential work caused chaos. Well, I think we know chaos in New South Wales at the moment, Premier. We are currently the chaos capital of Australia. And chaos happens when people don't know what to do. A bit of clarity calms chaos. I mean, look what happened yesterday in Fairfield. Thankfully, it's a bit better today. Thousands of cars queued up, people waiting for hours, many of them only getting tested because they think they are essential workers. Are they? Well, I don't know. And in many cases, they don't know. The Premier said yesterday that people should think twice about going to work unless the work you're doing, listen to this, is keeping someone alive or keeping someone going. So is that the new standard? You have to be saving a life or keeping someone going to go to work? What does keeping someone going mean? Rules are not supposed to be up for interpretation. They need to be clear and they need to be absolute. And once you've got the rules, people know what they can and can't do. For example, on Tuesday, it was a painter from Fairfield who went to work in Goulburn. He's since tested positive. Was his painting job keeping someone alive or keeping someone going? No. But when those in charge were asked about his case, they wouldn't say if it was essential or if it wasn't essential. What about the removalists who've taken the virus from New South Wales into Victoria? There's now 11 cases in Victoria. Talk of a 3-day lockdown. Was their work essential? Maybe it was. I don't know. And that's the thing. The Premier and the Health Minister can't answer a simple question. What is an essential worker? Now, if your answer is, I think I am, then Houston, we have a problem. And the message for the Premier is this. Don't wrap it in a riddle or give us a wink and a nod. Come up with a list and put it on the website. Then we know who's in and who's out. If the Premier doesn't know what essential work is, how the hell are we supposed to know? 131873. I'd love to hear from essential workers out there and people who think they're essential workers and people wonder, am I an essential worker? They're happy to whack rules on everything else, but not what is and what is not an essential worker. It's 8:12. Now, I know the West Australian Premier takes the wet lettuce approach to China. He's lectured the Prime Minister many times for taking a tough stance towards Beijing. But his latest stunt comes straight from the Communist Party playbook. Have a listen to this. It involves the Perth Theatre Trust. So Mark McGowan's Labor government runs a stack of venues and concert halls in WA, and they can be leased for all kinds of things, like functions or entertainment. And there's a little-known condition tucked away in the fine print. It turns out the government will only lease the venue to groups they agree with. The Australian Christian lobby has found out the hard way. The group's head wanted to run a few events in Perth, but he's been blocked after the Perth Theatre Trust invoked its venue hire policy. The trust is operated by the WA government. According to The Australian, the venue hire policy was finalised just days after Mark McGowan won the election in March. The trust's policy states it will not welcome organisations where the content of the event does not represent the views of the West Australian government. So you've got to be singing from the government's hymn sheet to book out the concert hall. And it's not just the Christians that have been banned. Performance groups who support Taiwan or Tibet, they've been knocked back too. The policy prohibits bookings from organisations identifying with countries whose political status is unclear or in dispute. So if you support Taiwan or Tibet, you're not welcome. Last year, the Perth Theatre Trust apologised to the Chinese government after it allowed the Taiwanese acrobatic troupe to perform at the State Theatre. Oh no, you can't have that. The Taiwanese acrobats. They're going to upset someone in Beijing. So let's go and grovel to China and apologise. Let's call it for what it is. Mark McGowan is a lapdog to China. He doesn't believe in freedom of religion or freedom of speech. The Christian lobby should be taking him to court. And they should point to West Australian law. There's a section in the Equal Opportunity Act which makes it unlawful to block access to facilities on the grounds of someone's religious or political belief. So it's there in black and white. And maybe Mark McGowan should read it. The Christians are banned. The Taiwanese are banned. The Tibetans are banned. What's going on here? Maybe the venues are all booked out by the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra. 131873, the open line number. Ben at 2gb.com if you'd like to email. And the text line is open for business. 0460 873 873. Let me go to Grace, who's called in. Good morning to you, Grace.
Oh, hi, Ben.
You want to talk about
how are you today?
nurses? Yeah, I'm doing well.
Yes, I want to talk about the nurse from Westmead Hospital, the one that on the 7:30 news that stated that she was fully vaccinated. I just feel that vaccines aren't offering the protection that they're supposed to provide. Generally, I thought that vaccines are supposed to protect you from the disease and stop you from catching and spreading it. So in this case, I'm just questioning the COVID-19 vaccines, whether they offer any protection.
Well, they do offer protection. They don't give you immunity from catching the virus or passing the virus on. But you're right. This Westmead Hospital nurse who's tested positive to COVID-19 was fully vaccinated, was wearing PPE and working in the COVID ward. So, no, it doesn't give you absolute protection. It obviously puts you in a better place if you catch the virus and hopefully will keep you out of hospital. But right now that hospital is an area of concern because a Westmead nurse has tested positive to COVID-19. 131873. What is an essential worker? Brad Hazard can't tell us. Kerry Chant can't tell us. Gladys Berejiklian can't tell us. Can you?
Sydney's best breakfast. Email Ben now at 2gb.com.
Thank you for being with us. 18 after 8. And if it's time for a new shower screen, see the best at Palmer's Glass, palmersglass.com.au. Now, schools are remaining closed for another 2 weeks at least, and Year 12 kids are anxious. They've spent the whole year preparing for drama, music and dance performances. They are due to begin next month, and students are worried they'll be cancelled like last year. And then you've got the trials. They're due to begin on July 26, and they're worth 30% of your final ATAR. Schools are closed until July 30. 500 schools, including the Catholics and independents, have postponed their trials by 2 weeks, but there are hundreds of other schools that have not. And parents say it puts their kids at a disadvantage. Paul Martin is the CEO of the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. Paul, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben.
Should there be a blanket rule for when the trials happen?
The trials are set by schools and determined by schools as part of their assessment program. So they're not determined or set by NESA. So they occur, generally speaking, within a 3 or 4 or 5 week space. Schools don't actually even have to have trials. So what we try and do is give schools as much flexibility as possible.
All right. I've got emails here from parents saying that they're worried about this because some of their contemporaries are able to delay their HSC trials while these kids have got to go ahead at a time when they're not able to be at school, they're not able to do their study as they traditionally would.
Yeah, look, it's very difficult for students this year as it was last year. I would say that last year's experience of the HSC taught NESA and schools and the teachers an enormous amount. So if a student can't do a trial, if a trial's unable to be held and can't be postponed, we'll provide some advice to the schools about alternative assessment marks. It's always the case that trials are different from school to school and place to place, so it's not a new thing. But we'll give as much advice to schools to make sure that students are not disadvantaged.
What about those kids who've been preparing all year for drama, music and dance performances because they were canned last year?
Yeah, look, they're going ahead at the moment. We're relying on health advice. Like everybody else, we listen at 11 o'clock and listen to Kerry Chant and the Premier. And as far as we know now, those dance and oral language orals are going ahead. So unless we get changed advice, that's going to happen. And then if they do change, we'll provide other alternatives for school students to make sure that they can demonstrate what they know and can do.
All right, I've got an email here from a parent at Carlingford High School A group of us have requested the trials be moved, but the principal is refusing to delay the exams by 2 weeks, even though 500 other schools have done so. My daughter has her heart set on studying medicine. This is causing her anxiety. So what does that parent do?
So there's two ways I'll answer that. Firstly, they need to talk to their school. If it's a Department of Education school, that's a matter for the department and the school principal, not really of NESA. So they need to make sure that they have the proper conversation with the department and with their school principal. As far as wanting to study medicine, last year every student who sat the HSC got an HSC mark, they got an ATAR, and they're in uni now. We made sure that they were looked after. So even though they had the most difficult time last year, NESA, working with teachers and parents, made sure that all those kids got a fair and equitable result. So I would say to that student and to that parent not to worry, listen to the advice, keep studying, and we'll all get there.
Okay, Sarah Mitchell, the Minister, says she can't formally change the date of the trials. It's controlled by you, and what you're saying is you are going to leave it to individual schools, right? You're not going to intervene at any point and say, okay, we need everyone on the same page.
The trials are always run by schools separately from NESA. We run the HSC and we provide advice about a range of assessments over the course of 12 months. But the trials are a school-based decision. They have been always. In fact, I did the trials in the early 80s. They're always run by the school. So it's not something that NESA decides or tells them what to do. But what we will do, Ben, is make sure that if schools can't run trials, that we will help them with alternative assessment tasks. We'll make sure that the kids are not disadvantaged. That's our job.
We no doubt will talk again, Paul. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.
Paul Martin, the CEO of the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. So he's saying because schools have always had the choice when they run their trials, this is not dramatically different. Mums and dads, you can have your say right now, 131873.
Sydney's best breakfast. Ben Fordham live on 2GB.
131873, the number. Susanna on the email says, G'day Ben, my daughter's 15. She's telling me she is allowed to have her boyfriend over. Is this correct? Well, Susanna, it kind of depends on what her mother says, and that's you. If you're following the health guidelines, you can have someone over if you are in a relationship with them. So if she's in a relationship with this boyfriend, then yes, officially speaking, he can come over. But then again, if you run the house and she's 15, it's up to you. You decide the health orders at your place. What's an essential worker? John, hello.
Yeah, good day, Ben. Look, it's not that easy to define. I'll ask you, do you think you're an essential worker? Do the people who work for you think they're essential? Some would say yes, some would say no. You add value to people, but are you essential? You have a look at just listening to your show. Bing Lee, righto, my microwave's broken. That's how I do my cooking. Is Bing Lee essential? For me, if my microwave's broken, yes. Palmer's glass. My shower screen's broken. I get water all over the floor. My kids get water all over the floor. It's going to destroy my floor. Is that essential for me? It probably is at the time. The painter who went to Goulburn, he was painting a hospital. So it's essential that we get the hospital finished so we can look after patients. So it's not that easy. You've got to have a look at it because look at your own situation. Are you essential? Is the world going to stop if you don't come and run your show?
Whoa.
It might for the mental health of some people.
I think some people would be doing cartwheels, mate, if I said I can't come in for the rest of time. But that's another story. But look, the Premier says you can keep on working if you're keeping someone alive or keeping someone going. But all of the examples you've just raised are spot on, and that's why I haven't suggested the painter wasn't essential. I haven't suggested any of these people aren't essential. I'm just suggesting that the people running the joint should probably say one way or another. Isn't that fair enough, John?
But then, in some situations, the painter mightn't be. It mightn't make a difference as to whether an office block in Sydney is painted today or in a month. But it might make a huge difference in a mental health facility looking after people who have severe mental health problems if we don't get it painted today.
Sure. And let me just pick up with the example you've just given. Okay, just say the painter is just doing an office block because all of the workers are at home. Well, this is an opportunity to get the office block painted. It's also keeping the painter in a job.
Yes. So, and that gets very essential. Like, I mean, the coffee shop at the corner, it's meant good for people's mental health to be able to walk up, grab a coffee and go home. But is it essential? No one's probably going to fall over and, you know, the world's not going to stop. But you stop people being able to go out, have a break, go and get their coffee while working at home, makes a big difference.
John, coffee is essential. There's no doubt about it. Coffee is essential, particularly when you wake up at the time that we wake up. I'll tell you what else is essential, that I send you a Kazanowski ham from our mates at Tender Gourmet Butchery. It's on its way to you right now, okay?
Now, that's essential. Thank you very much.
tendergourmetbutchery.com.au, and he raises a really relevant point. And Victoria came out and said, okay, this is who's essential and who's not. And maybe that's why Gladys Berejiklian doesn't want to go down that rabbit hole, because once you go down, you'll never get out. And that's why they're leaving it up to us. Scott Morrison said it. If you've got a job in an economy like this, then that is essential work, because we need to keep the wheels moving. 131873, the open line number. Your chance to win a couple of Spinal Ease pillows coming up, and your call's coming straight after 8:30.
Opinions that matter. News you can trust. This is Ben Fordham Live on Sydney's 2GB.
131873, that's the open line number. Now, this is just what we don't need right now. The Transport Workers Union is threatening to cripple food and fuel supplies by taking strike action in protest at significant changes to pay and conditions. Negotiations between the TWU and Toll for new enterprise agreements covering 7,000 workers have broken down, and Ewan Hannon at The Australian is saying that TWU officials have said the proposed action could start as early as mid-August. It could include 24-hour strikes and unlimited stoppages, disrupting grocery, alcohol and petrol. Come on. Now? While everyone's in lockdown, while we need groceries, while we need petrol, while we need, yes, from time to time, alcohol, give us a break.
This is Sydney's Best Breakfast with Ben Fordham on 2GB.
131873, the open line number. Let me go to Adam, who has got a student doing the HSC. Hello, Adam.
Good morning, Ben. I just wanted to talk about the timing of the HSC trials.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Look, my daughter's currently studying the HSC. She's spent about 12 years getting here to this point. She's worked really hard, and this year's really knocked her around now. But what seems to have happened is a lot of the schools are allowed, or the schools are allowed to move their trial date, but some are choosing not to. And I'm really not sure why. She's in a school that's not moving that date, and the students have approached the principal via email, not got a direct response. And, you know, the mental health of these students is quite significant. And although, yes, at the end of all this, they will get an ATAR, and I'm sure they'll get into uni, but will they get into the course that they would have otherwise got into? And I'm just really worried for them. And it's a really easy fix. They could just put a blanket rule that says that you each school has to apply a 2-week lead-up process to the trials, or, you know, and even getting Year 12 back into schools as well.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit torn on this, Adam, because I'm hearing both things from parents. There are some parents saying, no, my child is prepared now and is ready for the HSC trials, but I'm getting more emails from people saying, no, we're being told that we've got to go now when we would rather delay like other schools, and we don't want an unlevel playing field. So, as the gentleman told us, who's from the organisation in charge of deciding how all of these things work, it is up to the school when the HSC trials happen, and that was the case well before COVID came along. So it is difficult.